Well, good evening, my friends, and welcome to a evening chat about war, about Vietnam, about Ukraine, about the world issues out there. And you know my channel is basically pretty non-controversial for the most part. Of course, I have some controversial topics that I post now and again, but my intention is really to better mankind, better to the individual, and to improve the way that we interact with one another. If I were to set out some goals, it would be to make people think. That's pretty much it. Whether they come to a conclusion that I agree with is up to them, and that's not really my concern. But when it comes to war, I've found that most people have a pretty common understanding that war is complete bullshit and that it is people who have a lot of money and a lot of power and prestige and influence who are sending others off to fight battles for them in order to win land to make them look good, not because we need it, not because it's going to benefit anyone. And let's look back and see that most wars, at least over the last 50 years, that were American fought from the United States, where we went out and actually fought in a war, if you want to call it that, were not widely supported by the public. And in order to get support from the public, you have to use propaganda. Now, I could go back to World War II and World War I and the Lusitania and various ships that were perhaps sunk on purpose in order to bring certain countries into war. And knowing that that would create a war machine and a profiteering, which is to this day being well utilized. But I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the people. Because people can complain about the millionaires, the billionaires, the corporate profits that are made off of war, and the presidents and the politicians who send them off. But let's talk about the people, the citizens who don't stand by this shit. What's going on in Ukraine is a travesty, but it's nothing new. The point that I was making is that it's ironic to me, not even ironic, it's exactly what you'd expect. The fact that in Ukraine this is being so widely covered is because they are somewhat a friend of European nations, and to say it bluntly, they're white. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Brown people are not a major priority to people in the West. And I find that very unfortunate because when I see what's happening in Syria or in Afghanistan or Iraq, I see the same exact thing happening. I heard one person, he said it just so succinctly on my channel when he posted, and I said, why don't people care about, the Middle East? And he said, well, the Ukraine is a civilized nation. And I thought about this because it was so, not even coincidental, but just so tacky, because I'd heard that earlier in the day on a media channel or somebody who was trying to justify war by, oh, well, they're not civilized. Civilized? Look, if you can grow your own food and you have a shelter and you're able to function with your neighbors and you enjoy your life, you're pretty fucking civilized, in my opinion. Civilized does not mean you build skyscrapers and you have fancy buildings, or that you stick your nose up at others or sit in a restaurant and eat fancy food. Being truly civil just means that your neighborhood, your nation, your city, your state, wherever you live, can interact with one another in a civil manner. And I thought it was so unfortunate that the Middle East has not been covered in years, but all of a sudden we're covering Ukraine. But that's also good. But here's the main point that I'm making here. The unfortunate factor of this is the media. Even though I've watched a few different media outlets and they've done a pretty fair job at covering what's going on over there, I cannot help but just ignore most of the mainstream media any video that I see from CNN, NBC, ABC, I just go right past it to something else. And here's the unfortunate part about that. They're probably good stories. A couple of the ones I saw were actually decent and they really had some good coverage. But we've lost journalism, and we know this. The media has fucked up so bad over the last 10, 15 years that they have lost so much viewership but also respect that we don't even trust them. Because of this, here's the ironic part. We could actually do well to listen to some of these stories to understand how people feel and to understand some of the facts about Putin and war, but people won't even listen to them anymore because they have fucked up so bad. And they have screwed up so many stories and made up so much bullshit and propaganda to fill the time between good news stories that they've lost people's attention. And I'm talking to you, CNN. I'm talking to you, NBC or ABC, also Breitbart, Fox News, all of them. You have all completely fucked up by losing, and Vice News as well. They even had an opportunity to do something good, but no, they want to talk about gay lipstick companies or something random for the, LGBTQ community, or making a bong out of an ice. Vice does what they do, but I was just disappointed that so many media outlets that we once thought could actually cover this shit have completely fucked up. And I've lost interest in pretty much all of it. All of them. I mean, knowing that their interest. But let me reflect for a moment to prove my point. In the Vietnam era, and I want to pretext this with the fact that my father was in Vietnam, and he fought and hated it, and it fucked him up for life. And he died of carcinoma in his lung, his right lung, back in 92. And in our family, we believe he died from exposure to bullshit in Vietnam. Agent Orange, which, thank you Monsanto, was a well-known carcinogen, but still was put out there to defoliate, to make it, easier to find the enemy. The point is, we lost Vietnam. And the connection I want to make here is Walter Cronkite covered the Vietnam era. Many of you who are younger may not know Walter Cronkite, but he was the man. He covered all this shit back in the day. And in 1968, it's questionable to whether or not he shifted public opinion on the war so much, because he went over there. He wasn't one of these dumb shits from Fox or CNN that sits in a studio and talks about what's going on and, interviews and interrupts somebody from far away. He went over there to Vietnam. He actually rode back in a Huey, a helicopter with like 12 dead Marines or something. He was a badass, and that's how he got his props and his respect. Cronkite covered the war. He realized how fucked up it was. He talked to the soldiers. And that's the point I want to make here. As soon as this happened, the Vietnam War started being covered differently. Johnson did not want this shit to be a major issue. He didn't want to shift public opinion. He was very disappointed. And so much of the way media covers the war today is based on those early Vietnam days. All the way up to convincing Americans that there were weapons of mass destruction. When people talk about Iraq, they talk about, they said there were weapons of mass destruction, and then they said that it was Operation Iraqi Freedom, but then it was Operation Iraqi Recovery. It was all bullshit. But we often forget that before any of that, it was to go get bin Laden, right? The idea that he was harboring terrorists, or that somehow Saddam had something to do with 9/11. We know he didn't. It was the most horrendous, complete invasion of a country to a sovereign nation, to gain a foothold in a desert where there are plenty of resources that we now, more or less own. Sure, you put in a faux government, if you will. And let me just say, because I'm talking about this is exactly what Russia believes we've done in Ukraine. That we've installed, a Western-friendly government that wants to be NATO-friendly. And as many have said, that scares the shit out of Putin. He doesn't want a NATO country on his border. But my counter to that is tough fucking shit. Too bad, Putin. I'm sorry, but this guy's a fucking lunatic. This guy has been looking for power and control from the time he got into office. And here's the thing you have to realize. All people in power are lunatics. And that includes the country I live in. Joe Biden, I don't believe that guy is sane enough to understand half the shit he talks about, nor even half the people that he gets information from. And I also believe that in most countries, anybody who wants to gain that much power and then finally gets it will, let's just say, really suffer from a delusion of grandeur, and a mass delusion will ensue, with half the nation believing that they are the incarnation of some great leader that's going to lead them to, like, they're going to lead them like lemmings, if anything. And I feel like people need to step up to the plate, do their own thing, be their own people. I think it is lazy for us to look to leadership for answers. I think it is lazy for us to accept authority blindly without asking questions. I think it's also very offensive and lazy when people turn in their neighbors in the old term, like, oh, my neighbor's a witch, burn her at the stake. Because you don't like a person, you assume that they're a Nazi, a racist, a hater, a sympathizer for some side. People are not fucking listening to each other anymore. And that's where the media fucked up. They had the chance to actually cover things like this in a rational way where people could understand and comprehend and discuss with one another. And they took the route of least resistance for the last several years, just basically taking the low-hanging fruit, complaining about Trump, complaining about Biden, whatever it might be. And now, when it's time to actually take things seriously, we don't even know whether to listen or to believe anyone. Isn't it better to know? Well, maybe. Is there a nuclear threat? Are we really headed to World War III, as they say? I would not fucking be surprised. It would be a perfect cap after COVID. And here's the epiphany here is that, humans are always looking for a battle. All of us around the world. If there's not one thing to look at, we will find something or create something. And I feel like it's just, all right, COVID's over, what's next? And here we are with Russia. And maybe next time we'll have an asteroid or something more interesting, or a giant earthquake, or, who fucking knows? But what's most important is this. Live our lives. Not worrying about the future. Especially not worrying about the past. The past is over, my friends. It's way, way gone behind us. But embracing where we are and embracing the future in the sense that it's going to happen, whether we like it or not. And we're going to also have some hard times in our lives, and we're going to have some fun times. And we have to be able to embrace the fact that we just don't know when good times or bad times will come, what kind of adversity we may be faced with, whether or not somebody's going to invade our goddamn homeland. And, I'm not worried about that in the U.S., but I just mean for anyone who lives somewhere else. But who knows? Anything could happen at any time. I just want to live my life and be happy and have my family. And I guess what I've found is what matters the most is those connections we have, being able to love one another and connect with other people. And so that's what I've got for today. Thanks for listening. And I really just wanted to kind of talk about war for a minute. I think it's bullshit. I think it's bullshit that these leaders send off young people to fight in wars that the young people just don't even understand at all. And it pisses me off. So the old song, Mama, don't let your kids grow up to be cowboys, or whatever it is. Don't let your kids grow up to join the military. Talk them out of that when they're young. It's just my thought. A lot of folks would say, well, that's selfish. We need a standing army. We need people in there. Sure. Well, there's enough people who will do it on their own. As a conscientious parent, seeing where my country is going with its battles, I definitely would prefer my kids don't. If the shit ever hits the fan and somebody invades our borders, then you better believe that we are all armed in this world. This nation has more guns than people. So it's not like you have to join a military and go to some other land to defend your country. If you can protect yourself and you have a firearm, you can defend yourself when people come to your country. And isn't that what we should be doing? Just protecting our own home and leaving other people the fuck alone. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Be well.